Revived his classic work, The Wall, in Berlin, and just how difficult it was to do it. Roger Waters then on The Wall after this excerpt from the newly released live recording of that night. This is Another Brick in the Wall, Part 1. Another Brick in the Wall, Part 1, Roger Waters on the lead vocals and terrific sax solo as well from Garth Hudson, and one of the featured tracks, of course, on the Berlin 1990 double CD of The Wall, which has just been released by Roger Waters. Roger, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
And it amazed me when I first read that you were actually going to do The Wall again as a live show, because you'd done it 30-odd times with Floyd, and you recorded it with Floyd and sold an awful lot of albums and done a movie of it. And then suddenly there was going to be another performance. Did it surprise you, in a sense, that there would be another performance of The Wall?
People have spoken to me about it often in the intervening 10 years. But it wasn't until I was approached by the Memorial Fund that I really took the idea very seriously. I had actually said in an interview I did on American radio a couple of years ago, when they said, well, would you ever do the thing again? I said, well, the only place I'd ever do it outdoors is in Berlin if they take The Wall down there. Mm. Yeah, I guess I was kind of surprised.
Group Captain Leonard Cheshire, VC, is the moving force behind this Memorial Fund for disaster relief. In what sense did he motivate you then to create this performance?
Well, Mick Wellwood came and asked me if I might be prepared to do something for them, because they wanted an event to focus attention on the Memorial Fund, and asked me if I would go and meet with Leonard, which I did a couple of days later. And I was very impressed by him. He's a man who has devoted his whole life, really, to helping people worse off than himself since the end of the Second World War. Maybe his life was changed by being one of the official British observers at the dropping of the Nagasaki bomb. In fact, it was. And when you meet somebody like that, whose whole life is devoted to helping others, it's very hard to say, no, I won't help you for a few months. And I think the idea of the Memorial Fund is one that appeals to me, particularly as my own father was killed in the Second World War. And the idea of a living monument to people who gave their lives in wars, for good or bad reasons, is a good one. And so I was quite clear, after having spoken to him for about an hour, that I would do whatever they wanted me to.
Yeah, because it's a practical memorial, isn't it? I mean, it's helping those who are coming still and who are being affected by disaster.
That's right. Their slogan is, for every life lost, a life saved.
And what you staged there became the biggest rock show ever staged. I mean, it must have been a nightmare simply getting it together technically.
Yeah, yeah, it was. The trouble with it was that because it was for a charity rather than for profit, it meant that there was no robber baron in the background putting the money up in order to take the cream if the thing happened. Mm-hmm. So we were faced with terrible cash flow problems.
I mean, I heard a story that at one point construction people were actually demanding cash to continue,
Oh, that was happening all the time.
Did you ever doubt it would happen?
Oh, yes.
Many times?
Oh, almost every moment of every day for months. Yeah, it looked really shaky for a very long time.
Was there a point when you turned a corner when you thought, no, now it is going to happen? It cannot stop.
Well, there were a number of points where we turned corners where I thought, if it doesn't happen now, we're all up shit creek. We'd spent a lot of money, and if it didn't happen, there was no way of getting any of it back. So when we'd spent $4 or $5 million by hook or by crook, and there were some pretty edgy moments.
It was going to happen.
It had to happen.
It was a massive scale, as we say, on a visual level. But some of the finest moments actually are remarkably intimate performances. Before we carry on chatting, I thought maybe we'd take some time out and hear two of the finest of the intimate performances, and we're going to hear Sinead O'Connor's version of Mother, followed by Joni Mitchell in superb form, I feel, on Goodbye Blue Sky. Featuring the flute of James Galway, Joni Mitchell on lead vocals on Goodbye Blue Sky. Before that, Sinead O'Connor's Mother, as performed in Berlin, 1990, at Roger Waters' Wall concert. Memorial Fund for Disaster Relief. You chose, Roger, Potsdamer Platz which emotionally makes an awful lot of sense, but in practical terms must have thrown up even more problems than anywhere else you could have chosen. Because, I mean, wasn't it full of explosives and things
Yeah,
like
the
that?
ground hadn't been, nobody but East German border guards had been on the ground that we used since 1945. And it was riddled with bits of old metal, some of which were packed with high explosive. We found an enormous amount of ammunition and some quite big bombs. But the business of sweeping the area for mines was one of the smallest problems. The fact of the matter was that the border between what was two countries ran right through the site, and consequently the bureaucratic problems of getting the permissions to use the site were staggering.
Did you genuinely find that the authorities were sympathetic to what you were trying to do, though, on both sides?
Yes, they became increasingly sympathetic. The more they understood of what it was, the more sympathetic they became. But nevertheless, it had to go to cabinet level in East and West Germany, and I may say in North America, and to Whitehall and everywhere else, because in a city governed by the Americans, the British, the French, and the Russians, the complexities of getting permissions to do a concert like that were extraordinary.
You went further than that. You actually involved the armed forces of the respective allies as well along the way.
We did, yeah. The British Army were very helpful with bulldozers and things, but the Russians were the most helped. They actually supplied this 100-piece marching band, which was the combined marching band of the combined Soviet forces in Germany.
That was a remarkably moving moment in the entire show. I mean, it's possibly hard for you to appreciate exactly how it hits because you were there. You know, you were on the stage. But
well, it was the moving time for me and for our team was when we went to the Russian military base in East Germany, about 50 miles outside Berlin, and we were the first Westerners who'd ever been on this base, and we were very warmly welcomed. You could see the enormous joy and pleasure it gave these bandsmen to be involved in the thing and to be allowed to be up there blowing.
Yeah. I was watching the show live on TV with a group of friends, and there were lots of wet eyes.
Good.
When Bring the Boys Home was performed.
Yeah, well, it's very apt as well for something that is being done for the Memorial Fund.
Yes. It must have been kind of difficult on the day, making sure everybody was in the right place at the right time, or that they even actually turned up on the day, because some of the stars are fairly renowned for not being entirely reliable. They'll promise something and then maybe not deliver. How was it?
Well, most of us were there they started arriving on the Thursday, and we had a rehearsal room in the basement of one of the hotels we were staying in, and it was terrific. In the mornings we would gather, and I might be rehearsing with Cindy, and then with Joni, and then with the band, and then with bits and pieces all through the mornings, and then I tended to go to the site in the afternoons.
But people were just mucking in together, were they? There was a sense of team spirit.
There was a terrific sense of team spirit. But Van Morrison I'd had for one day in Bray Studios in England, one afternoon, and he'd come in and he'd sung through the tune a couple of times, and he'd gone, yeah, well, that's all right, okay, and he'd gone away. And I discovered later he wasn't actually going to arrive in Berlin until 8:30 on the Saturday night.
And it was kicking off about 10 or something.
Kicking off at 10. So he did arrive. He did a festival in the afternoon in Cologne. So he did arrive at about 8:45, and I had him, and we ran through Comfortably Numb with him with a piano in the green room. And then he was also singing a line in The Tide is Turning. And so I had Van and Bryan Adams and Cindy and Joni Mitchell and Paul Carrack and myself all stood round the piano with the lyrics in front of us, learning The Tide is Turning at 9:30, half an hour before we were due to go on stage. So it was pretty close to the bone time-wise, but they all did it.
Going to play a track from the album which includes Bryan Adams. You just mentioned him.
Bryan Adams was just marvellous. He came to Bray as well, and then he came on Friday, I think he came to Berlin, and he was just...
Charming, very hard-working fella.
He's a marvellous man, yeah.
And the track he's on is called?
Young Lust.
Bryan Adams featured on that one. That's Young Lust from The Wall, Berlin, 1990. We're talking to Roger Waters. 150,000 people turned up officially. I've heard estimates that a lot more than that were actually there on the night in the end.
Well, there were, yeah. 150,000 was the crowd that we were aiming for.
Yeah.
So I think we sold 125,000 tickets, and then we had lots of tickets. We were holding back 25,000 for the night. They said there was going to be a big walk-up, but then we got wind that there was a lot more people there than that.
And it can get dangerous to keep them out in many senses.
Yeah. So I think 190-odd thousand paid, and then it was looking as if it might get dangerous, so then we took the barriers down. And I'm happy to say that, you know, the last few people who'd paid could have got extremely irate that suddenly the barriers were taken down and it was free for anybody else who was out there. But they didn't. They were remarkably well behaved, and I think understood that it was for a gig for charity, and that's where their money had gone, and so they didn't feel too hard done by.
Yeah.
Though it did mean that they were rather crushed, and it was a bit hard to hear and see stuff at the back, because there were over 300,000 people there.
Good God.
At the end of the day.
In a sense, then you suddenly realise that the scale of the operation had to be as big as you made it to entertain the people a quarter of a mile back.
That's right.
How big was that wall? How tall?
It was 60 feet high.
I hate getting into statistics, but I mean, it's sometimes on the TV you don't quite realise how big it is.
Well, it's like a 200-yard long 6-story building is the best way of describing it. And if you go, I used to occasionally, in the run-up to it, as I was driving around London from meeting to meeting or from a studio to preparing tapes somewhere, I was occasionally stand in the street and look at a 6-story building and then look down the street 100 yards one way and 100 yards the other way and think, no, this isn't going to happen, you know, it's impossible. Yeah. But it did.
You're a bit of a perfectionist too, so you must have had sleepless nights, frankly.
But yeah, lots of sleepless nights, and there was no way it was going to be perfect, but we had to paint in big broad brush strokes, and happily most of the paint stuck.
How do you feel it did go on the night? I mean, there were one or two hiccups.
Yeah, we had a bad technical breakdown very shortly after it started, which threw everybody rather. But, you know, we got through it from beginning to end, and all the movie worked, and all the projections worked, and, you know, the fireworks went off when they were meant to, and everybody sang their songs sort of in tune, and considering that we really hadn't had any rehearsals. We had no full rehearsals with everybody there. We didn't rehearse the wall coming down because we couldn't. I think it was a major miracle that it happened.
An amazing cast of actors, singers, performers you managed to assemble. Is there any common link between these people you chose to ask?
They're all people whose work I admire. And they're all people who said yes.
That's always useful. Did you find it difficult then sometimes that maybe you had a perfect idea for somebody to cast in a part and they just weren't ready to commit themselves?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. There were, and obviously the whole thing would have been made enormously easier if Bruce Springsteen had been singing Another Brick too, you know, because suddenly all the people buying the TV show or the people putting up money or sponsors or things would have been leaping out of the woodwork, you know, and you couldn't have stopped them pouring money into the thing. But it's a tricky thing for people to commit to doing, because they don't want to get involved in something that's going to be a disaster, quite rightly.
And they saw a lot of potential for disaster, perhaps.
And there was an enormous amount of potential. So I did have quite a few people who said yes and then pulled out. And so, but the people who finally did the show, I was extremely happy to get, and they were all terrific.
Important thing, it's not an ego thing, is it, doing this sort of show? You're just a member of the cast.
That's right. Yeah.
Not the superstar.
That's right. I was particularly struck by Albert Finney and Marianne Faithfull and Tim Curry and Thomas Dolby was a real revelation to me. He was just fantastic. He just came and he rehearsed and practiced, and he kept coming up with new ideas and saying, you know, would it be all right if I hung from a crane? Hey, Thomas, please be my guest.
Bring the crane in,
Bring that crane over here. And he did it. You know, he was terrific.
At the end of the day, how much money could this raise? What's its potential?
It depends, obviously, on how many people buy the record and how many people buy the video. I think the least that it will raise is about 2 million sterling, and I suppose the most that it could raise would be about 10.
And this is in perpetuity too, isn't it? These, I notice on the back of the record, artists and yourself for this recording have donated all royalties.
Yeah, it's all the publishing and all
Yeah.
the artists' royalties and everything all goes in perpetuity to the fund. So who knows, if it became a record that people went on buying for the next 20 years, it could... and then there's merchandising, which is now available. There have been a few hiccups, I believe, in people sending in money and not getting their T-shirts and things because of the cash flow problems within the
But they're going to
fund.
get them,
But
aren't
that's been ironed out now, and they are now producing enough T-shirts to meet all the orders.
Let's play another track. This is Van Morrison, along with certain members of the band as well, and Comfortably Numb. Roger Waters, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.